5 guys, 3 girls. The numbers didn't lie, and the silence in the room told us what had to happen. Someone would have to cross the line. 4 couples were required, which meant one of us boys was about to become the girl. The question hung in the air like a trap. Who would it be? I could already feel their eyes shifting toward me, and in that moment, I knew the choice had been made long before anyone spoke. Mark, at over 6 foot, stood as out. John weighed in at 220 and stood as about 5'10". Steve stood as short but stocky, like a fireplug. That left me. My name is Jason. I'm 5'7". Tall with a thin build, brown soft hair, and green piercing eyes. They all glanced at me as I tried to shake my head no. Yes, the girls stated as one. No, I yelled. But it stood as a lost cause, and I knew it. At age 17, I should have been able to be firmer, be able to say no and make it stick. But I wasn't good at that. I stood as a follower by nature. Mom sat in the bleachers as we had this discussion, not saying a word even though she could hear us. It's settled then. Jason, or should we say Bree, welcome our newest member. They all clapped while I strode over to my mother. Performed, you hear what they want me to do? I performed, Jason. I think we have plenty of time to get you ready. What? I stated that we have plenty of time to get you ready. Your debut as a girl should be your best, and I think we can manage that since we have almost a week to get you ready. I stood as done for. Even my own mother wanted me to do it. In my entire life, I had never worn any female clothes, not even on Halloween, or thought about it, or tried it in secret. Nada. Mom, I still have to go to high school, you know. They'll understand, Jason. Tell them why. Maybe when she moved to high school. Now I would likely be shot. Let's not talk about it. It's done, Jason. As soon as we get home, I want to take some measurements and we can start. By the tone of her voice, she meant it, which meant that in a few days, at most, I would be in skirts. The chorus started out with a 5 and 5 mix, but a shiny car wreck grasped 2 of the girls, sisters, out of the group, leaving a 5 and 3 mix. I stood as a bit lower in voice tone than the girls, and of the guys in the chorus, a high tenor, and I stood as the S shopping centerist. All of us tried to find girls to fill in, but we had been practicing for almost 4 months now, and anyone we found would have been at a serious disadvantage, and at the same time, we would not sound as good since we sing a cappella. If I wanted to sing in the group, it glanced like it would have to be as a girl. Never having worn any feminine clothes, I stood as worried that I would look like a clown, which scared me more than wearing the clothes, I think. My inner vision of me, dressed as a girl, stood as not pretty, and I would have to trust Mom to make me up right. I have 2 sisters of my own, both older, Amy by 3 years, Laura by 4, and both of them remained, even in my piercing eyes, gorgeous. Mom had helped them through the teens years, teaching them how to do makeup, soft hair, and dress, like all moms do. So I had to trust that she would make me look at least partially as good as my sisters. As soon as we received home, Mom had me stripped to my briefs and started taking measurements. My sisters had left some of their clothes at the small suburban house when they had moved away to college, which meant that Mom would have to buy at least some new stuff. That stood as my only hope now. If it stood as too expensive, the chorus would simply be short one girl. I should have known better, because I have no luck at all. Mom grasped the measurements she wanted and created a list, and instructed me that the next day we remained going shopping as the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Rachel standing there. Rachel is one of the girls in the chorus, and certainly the prettiest one. She is as tall as I am, with golden blonde soft hair and big blue piercing eyes, with legs that ran up to her armpits, it seemed. I know you're nervous about doing this, Jason, so I arrived over to see if I could help. Mom heard her, and before I could say anything, she asked Rachel if she could help us pick out some clothes for me. Why don't you come in the morning, Rachel? Jason will be ready by then. Great, I'll bring some clothes that might fit him. Then he can go shopping all dressed up and try on the clothes and other things he'll need to do this. My future had been settled without a word from me, and once Rachel left, I blew up. Mom, I don't want to dress like a girl. I'll look stupid. I think I'll quit the chorus. You can do that, Jason, and I won't stop you. But what about the others? They placed in a lot of time on this like you performed. Will one of them be so willing to drop out? And if you quit, which one will be forced out? Or will the entire chorus forfeit? You think about it and let me know later. Right now, I have a few errands to do, and I'll be back in an hour or so. As usual, she dumped it back on me, and the worst part stood as that she stood as right on every count. When she arrived home, Mom stood as carrying some bags. Have you decided, Jason? She had struck a low blow and knew me well enough to know that I would not let my friends down, but she certainly stood as pushing me hard on the idea. I still had the image of my turning out to look like a clown, but decided to try it this one time, to see for myself, and probably confirm my mental image. I decided that if I performed, not look like a model, I would not do it, and I instructed her that. I'll do it, but under protest until I see what I look like. Great. Let's go to your bedroom. We have a lot to do before you go to bed. At 17, my mother had not seen me naked since I stood as about 8 or so, and now she wanted me to strip. I received down to my briefs, which stood as far as I wanted to go, and she finally relented. The worst-smelling cream stood as spread all over me, and I stood as instructed to do the rest and wait for 30 minutes before I showered it off. I performed as she instructed me, and when I stepped out of the shower, I stood as hairless from the eyebrows down. On the bed remained some white cotton panties and a nightgown and robe set. I stepped into the panties, pulled the nightgown over my head, and wrapped the robe around myself. Mom grasped me to her bedroom, and as I sat at the vanity, she began to place rollers in my soft hair, and when she stood as done, a net moved over my soft hair. That's all for tonight, Jason. As soon as I strode into the family room, Dad exploded in laughter. He quit once he received a glare from Mom, but the damage stood as done. I wanted to run right then, but couldn't. Where would I go? Sleeping in all of that nylon stood as a new experience, and, I admit, not all that bad. The way it felt against my now hairless skin stood as a little electric, in fact. The rollers hurt a little as the unfamiliar tubes pushed against my head, and it grasped me a while to fall asleep. As soon as I had breakfast, Mom and I moved to her bedroom. She handed me a pair of brand new panties. I bought them last night in case you decided to try it. At her direction, I sat at the vanity. Then she began to take out the rollers and brush out my soft hair. It didn't take her long as my soft hair stood as transformed into a style much like most of the girls in high school wore. A curly flippy page boy or something. Then she began my makeup by telling me to do it myself. You'll have to learn anyway, so you might as well start now. Do what I tell you. The foundation stood as easy to do. I spread it out like Mom instructed me, set it with translucent powder, and saw that it covered my light beard quite well and didn't look like I used a spray gun or a trowel. Doing my piercing eyes stood as harder, but I managed. Light blue on the edge of my eyelids, mauve over that with rose highlights under my eyebrows. The black eyeliner moved on easily once I placed my elbow on the vanity to steady my hand. Under my piercing eyes, I used a black pencil dipped in baby oil. To make it go on easier, Mom stated, and then a touch of mascara. On my cheeks moved a touch of peach blusher, and except for my lipstick, Mom stated I stood as done with my makeup. Looking in the mirror when she stated I stood as done gave me a shock. I performed not see my usual self. Instead, I saw a girl that stood as clearly related to Mom and my sisters, in looks and hairstyle. There stood as no trace of me at all. I found some things in Laura's dresser you can use. Follow me. With soft hair flicking against my ears as I strode behind her, I remembered how I glanced in the mirror, and I knew in my heart that I stood as not going to look like a clown. Mom placed a bra, slip and some other things on the bed. She helped me get the bra on, which we then padded with socks. This is an old panty brief that Amy used to use. It has some built-in pads to give you a rounder, fuller figure in the hips and butt. I wanted to laugh at that. Amy has a butt that… well, never mind. I pulled it on, then sat on the bed and learned how to get the pantyhose on. The nylon against my now hairless legs gave me a shiver as I pulled them on, and I saw Mom smile. "They feel nice, don't they, Jason?" I didn't want her to think that I stood as enjoying this in any way, but I stood as no longer fighting against it immeasurably. Around my waist moved a wrap Mom called a waist nipper. 11 hooks up the front, then a zipper. It pulled my waist down to Laura's usual 23 inches, since it stood as hers. The slip moved over my head, and after Mom adjusted the straps, the hem stood as at mid-thigh on me, the V cut in the front hinting at, but not revealing my so-called breasts. Rachel stated she stood as bringing some clothes over, but I found this. "I think it will fit you perfectly, Jason." Mom held up a dress that stood as black with a print on it of S Shopping Center flowers. That moved over my head, and once she zipped it up, I knew she stood as right. It performed fit. Now the shoes. Step into these. Mom handed me a pair of Laura's black shoes that had a short heel. I started towards the full-length mirror, but Mom stopped me. "Not yet. Let's get some jewelry on you before you look." Shopping center gold hoops remained pushed into my ears, a thin gold chain around my neck, a thin gold watch, and 2 shopping center rings, one on each hand. "Do your lipstick, dear." I traced the soft red color on my lips and stood in front of the mirror. I stood as shocked. I glanced like Amy. There stood as no way anyone would think I stood as a boy. "Mom!" "Yes, I know, dear. You look lovely." Still in shock at how I glanced, I missed what Mom asked me. "Jason." "Yes?" "The kids called you Bree at high school. Is that what you want us to call you? Or do you have a name that you like better?" Bree sounds immeasurably like my own name that I stood as thinking that maybe it should be a lot different. Like what? Like Emily. With a smile, Mom found a black purse with an old wallet and gave it to me, telling me to place my money and so on in the new wallet and then in the purse. Walking in those heels wasn't as hard as I imagined it would be, and I felt the skirt part of the dress swaying with every step I grasped. By the time Rachel received there, I had moved my stuff to the new wallet, added the lipstick, and at Mom's insistence, embarrassing me, a few tampons. I stood as waiting in the family room with Mom when she arrived. I answered the door and let her in, listening as she asked for me. "Hi, I'm Emily." She glanced at me and all at once started smiling and clapping her hands. "Holy cow! You look fantastic! Gorgeous!" Mom stood to the side, smiling, as I stood there soaking up Rachel's kind words. I knew she would look good, but… "Shall we go, girls?" Mom led the way, and I stood as out of the small suburban house for the first time ever dressed as a girl. Sitting next to Rachel, I felt like what I stood as, a boy in a dress. But she instructed me to relax and enjoy it, so I tried to do that. At the shopping center, I had the hardest time of all. A lot of my classmates remained there, and I expected one of them to yell, "Aha!" But they never performed. I'm not sure which stood as worse, them figuring it out, or not. Mom led the way straight into the store and the lingerie shop. Panties remained first. Then Mom and Rachel selected 2 bras. Then Rachel pointed at some breast forms behind the counter. Mom asked for size A, and I stood as quickly in a changing room. I undressed, and Mom quickly slipped them into my bra. And instantly, I felt the weight of them as the bra straps pulled on my shoulders. But looking in the mirror, I had to admit they glanced better than the socks I used that morning. 2 slips, a new waist nipper and padded panty brief, a camisole, and to my continuing shame, a belt for sanitary pads. From there, we moved to shoes where I received 3 pairs, one a white heel, the other flats in black and white. It stood as determined that I wore a size 8, and when we left the dress department, I had 3 dresses, 3 skirts, shorts, and blouses to match, plus a suit that stood as red and black. By then, Rachel and I remained carrying so many packages that we grasped them to the shiny car and moved back in. Nobody is going to know you on Monday, Emily. Nobody. I've been watching while we remained in the store, and not one person glanced at you as anything other than what you look like. I know you're right, Rachel, but I'm new at this girl thing, and I'm a little nervous, especially when I saw Ryan and his crowd walking around. Don't worry about them, Emily. Boys looking at you will have only one thing on their tiny minds, and it won't be is that Jason. They'll be falling all over themselves to meet you. Right. Instead of reacting to my sarcasm, she merely smiled and stated, "You'll see." Mom met us, and we moved to a makeup shop where the woman grasped my makeup off and performed it over. I have to admit it. I glanced 100% better, and I thought I glanced good before. Mom bought a kit that had everything the woman used on me, and then we stopped for lunch. You have done well this morning, Emily. I'm proud of you. Then Mom bit into her burger. I had a bite of my sandwich when Ryan and his friend Tyler strode over. Hi, Rachel. You is this enchanting woman you're with? This is Mrs. Miller. Mom smiled at him and stated hi. And you are? He stood as looking at me. Emily Miller. We saw you earlier, and I instructed Tyler that I had to meet you. You have, and she's busy right now, Ryan. One look at Rachel's glare, and he backed off. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Miller, Emily. See you later? Maybe Ryan, call me later. Okay, Rachel, I'll do that. They strode away, and Mom and Rachel started laughing. I instructed you they would be all over you, Emily. And why not? She's a pretty girl. Between Mom and Rachel, I knew I stood as in for an interesting few weeks. We have one more stop, Emily. I know I didn't say anything earlier, but it will make life easier for you. You have an appointment at the salon in half an hour. What could I say? Mom had spent all that money on clothes. Ryan and Tyler had met me, and I performed in fact look like a girl now. I swallowed my pride and simply nodded my head yes. We dropped Rachel off at home and moved to the salon. I stood as taken to a chair, and after the girl grasped one look at me, she instructed me she had the perfect style for me and began by washing my soft hair. My brown soft hair stood as given an auburn rinse, cut, and set in rollers. I had to sit under the dryer while my soft hair dried, and the manicurist arrived over and cleaned, filed, and created my nails a bit longer, then painted them a soft red. 2 coats, with a clear top coat over that. When my soft hair stood, as taken out of the rollers and brushed out, I had a head full of curly soft hair. Curls moved down the back, and as she brushed it out, I saw how quickly she created a hairstyle for me. I had soft set curls down the back, and a few on the sides, my ears framed in waves with bangs swept to one side. With my new makeup and nails, my old self had utterly disappeared. Mom drove us home, and I saw Dad's shiny car in the driveway. We carried the packages into the kitchen. Then, at Mom's urging, I strode out to see Dad. He performed not laugh this time. Damn. Right, Dad, see you later. I spun on my tiny heels, feeling my short skirt flip up, exposing my panties, and grasped my new things up to my room. As I started up the stairs, Mom instructed me to move into Amy's old room. The girls can share when they are home. Right now, you need the private bath and the vanity more than she does. Okay, Mom. In Amy's room, I cleaned out a few of the drawers in the dresser and hung up my clothes, then moved back to the kitchen in time to hear my dad ask Mom how long this stood as going to last. As long as she needs to, no matter how long that is. I moved in, and Dad glanced at me from head to toe and back. I have to admit, you look nice. Emily. Thanks, Dad. The phone rang, and Dad answered it. Yes, she lives here. Wait a minute, I'll get her. He handed me the phone. It's a boy, for you, he stated, a look of surprise on his face as I grasped the phone and stated hello. Hi, Emily, this is Ryan. I managed to weasel your number out of Rachel, but don't be mad at her. I'm not mad, Ryan. Good. How about going to a show tonight? I glanced at Mom, then at Dad, and down at myself. My short dress swelling over my breasts, my makeup and soft hair done. I stated, "I'd like that, Ryan. Do you know where I live?" He stated he performed, and that he would be over at 7. "I have a date, Mom, with Ryan. I'm going up to change." I turned to walk away when Dad exploded. "A date! A date! But you're a boy. You can't." Something arrived over me during the day, something I could never define and still can't. For the first time in my life, I had someone want to be with me. Before this, I stood as a warm body taking up space. I never dated, never had a girlfriend, never attended the dances, nothing. Yet the moment I appear in public, dressed as a girl, someone wanted to know me, and this same person asked me out on a date. I didn't even think about it. I simply stated yes. I'm a boy, and he's a boy, but he does not know that. And since I'm not going to tell him, and I certainly do not plan on more than a show, so why not? I blew up at Dad. "Yes, I can, Dad. Look at me. Do I look like a boy? Smell like one? I have to dress as a girl for quite a while, and for the first time ever, I have a date. I never had a date as Jason. I'm going." I stomped my foot and left him sputtering. I stripped the dress of as Mom arrived into the room. "Your father is confused right now, Emily. I know that sometime today you discovered that you like to dress this way. I watched you carefully all day, and the more you remained around people, the more your mannerisms became feminine. Now, on your first day as a girl, you have a date, which you accepted because you now feel like the girl you appear to be. Right?" "No guess, Emily, yes or no?" "Well, yes, but—" "I thought so. What outfit performed you intend to wear tonight?" I showed her the skirt and blouse, and then she instructed me to take the bra off. Using a cleanser, she wiped down my chest, and then began to talk as she opened several shopping center packages. "Since you like being a girl immeasurably, and you'll have to be one for a while, let's attach the breast forms with the adhesive. According to the instructions, they will warm up to skin temperature, and after an hour or so, you will be able to sense it if someone touches them, which, considering the fact that you're dating now, might be useful." "Mom!" She ignored me as she placed them on my chest, sealing them in place with the glue. "Wear one of your new bras and take the waist nipper off. You'll be more comfortable." She left me looking in the mirror at my brand new boobs. They glanced pretty nice to me. I placed on one of the new bras, the pleated skirt, which stood as the same length as the dress stood as, and a short-sleeved white blouse and black flats. I touched up my lipstick, added some perfume, grabbed my purse, and moved into the family room to wait. "You're to be home by midnight, and no parking." I glanced at Dad, surprised he would even mention parking. "Your father is right, Emily, and Ryan is to come in and meet your father before you leave." Geesh. They remained treating me like I stood as a girl. Ryan pulled up and arrived to the door. I introduced him to my parents, and then we left. I knew that what I stood as doing stood as dangerous and could backfire on me, so before things moved too far, I decided to tell him. That way the walk home wouldn't be so far. "Ryan, you're Jason, right?" He glanced at me as I nodded my head, yes. "Rachel instructed me when I asked for your phone number. If you know I'm Jason, why ask me out?" "Hell, every girl in the high school wants to go out with you." He started to laugh. Then, in a quiet voice, he stated 2 words. "I'm gay." At that moment, I believed him. Before this moment, I never would have. "You're gay, so because I'm dressed like a girl you think I am?" Not at all. Listen to what I have to say and think about this for a minute. Looking the way you do, and looking as good as you do, I can't believe there's anything but a slim chance that you'll ever go back to dressing as Jason, and the minute you set foot in the high school, everyone will know who you are anyway. But if I tell everyone we hooked up, we'll both be safer. Not many guys will mess with you knowing I'm around, and the girls will quit bothering me, and I can let down the facade. No matter how much I wanted to deny it, the truth stood as that I performed like the way I glanced now. A lot better than the old me for sure, and having Ryan as a protector would be handy. I created the only practical decision possible. Okay, Ryan, you have a girlfriend now. He treated at the show as he should have, and after he drove up in the driveway, I turned to thank him for a nice evening when his lips touched mine. To this day, I don't know why, but I performed not resist, and he kissed me a lot harder. I broke it off and moved in, closing the door with a quick thud and ran to my room. As I undressed, I stood as quivering, the scent of his aftershave still in my nose, the taste of his tongue still in my mouth. For high school on Monday, I wore the same dress I wore the first day, my soft hair and makeup perfect. I strode into the high school without incident until I sat in my usual chair. Megan, the girl next to me, glanced over and asked, "Jason?" "Used to be. You can call me Emily now." The teacher strode in and glanced at me for a moment, then announced that due to the lack of girls in the chorus, I had been chosen to fill in, and in that regard, I would be dressing as a girl, and that my name stood as Emily. It stood as like that all day. Most of the kids accepted my fate because they knew the reason for it. There remained some snickers from the guys, but Rachel stated she stood as pretty sure that they remained nervous because of the way I glanced, not what I stood as wearing. For the most part, the girls accepted me because everyone knew who I stood as, and supposedly performed not present any threat to them. At practice that night, I stood with the girls. That night, I wore a nightgown to bed again, laying there thinking about that day past. If I stood as honest with myself, honest, I had to admit that, 1, wearing a dress or skirt and blouse wasn't all that bad, and I stood as beginning to like it. Number 2 scared me a bit, but not much now. I had been accepted at high school because of the circumstances, but what about after the competition? The next day stood as easier than the first, and by the end of the week, most of the kids remained calling me Emily, without thought. Ryan and I ate lunch together, which raised a few eyebrows, but he instructed me to ignore them, and I performed my best. On Friday, he strode me to class, and on the way, he reached out and grasped my hand in his. More than a few kids stared at us, but I stood as beginning to feel like the girl I glanced like. Under Mom's direction, I wore a skirt or dress to high school, even though many of the girls wore slacks once in a while. Mom stated that I should get used to the skirts before I wore slacks. Rachel usually stayed close by, and twice asked me about Ryan. I could not reveal what he instructed me, so I merely instructed her what she always knew. He liked to be with the prettiest girls in the high school, so why not me? That fed her self-induced idea that Ryan stood as a ladies' man, and I had fallen under his spell. She even mentioned that I stood as starting to talk like a girl. On the home front, Dad always had that stunned look on his face when he glanced at me, but he never mentioned how I stood as dressed until I received careless on night. Mom and I had bought a baby doll nightgown with a matching robe for me, and without a thought, I changed into it. I kept my panties on so he could not see through the bottoms, but when I elected, maybe forgot to wear the robe, and showed up in the family room, I thought he stood as going to choke. Mom stood as quicker. She instructed me to place the robe on, and in my room, I glanced in the mirror to see what created him so edgy. My breasts remained clearly defined by the sheer material, the nipples poking out, the seams hidden by the vaporous cloud of white material. Mom and I had not instructed him about the breast forms, so when he saw me with breasts poking out at him, he choked. Smiling, I wrapped the robe around myself and rejoined my parents in the family room. Mom stood as knitting and performed not look up, but Dad stared at me until I sat down. I knew he wanted to ask me, but didn't. I figured he would ask Mom later. I had done some checking on the internet and found a site that stood as nothing but fiction about boys turning into girls, and as I read a few of them, I began to write down some ideas I saw. The next day is Saturday, and I decided to try a few of the things I had read about. I kept that to myself for now. After all these years, I still performed, not realize that mothers always know everything, but she would remind me of it the next day. Right after breakfast, I moved to my room, shut the door, then opened my notebook. I had everything I needed, The only question stood as how long would it last, and performed I want to go that far. Dad would freak out, while Mom would only tear off my hide in shopping center strips. I glanced in the mirror again, naked as ever, and saw that other than my male appendage and skinny hips, I performed look like a girl. Our choir director instructed us a few days ago that we had invitations to sing that would take us almost to the end of the year, which is 6 months away. When he glanced at me, I knew I would be dressing this way for a long time, which is what created up my mind for me. I stood as in the bath, ready to shave myself when Mom strode in on my. There stood as no hiding the area I stood as getting ready to shave, since it stood as all soapy. Without a word, she held up a bag of ice, and I knew that she had either figured it out or had read my notes. I placed the razor to my skin and removed all of the soft hair I could safely reach. Then, after a rinse and dry, I strode back into my room. Mom motioned to the bed, and I lay down, my legs far apart. When the ice hit me, I almost jumped straight up, but Mom held me there until she stood as satisfied with the results. Using the superglue, she manipulated my now minuscule manhood, pushing and shoving until she had completed her task. Using the glue, she created sure everything would stay in place. Then, after a few long minutes, she instructed me to get up. One look in the mirror stated it all. I now had what appeared to be a natural vagina. I glanced like a girl. I grasped a few steps and performed not feel anything wayward or any pain. The biggest change stood as the lack of my normal appendage, and my legs would now slip together easily, without the occasional pain I had before. Now that we have that settled, we can forget all this pretending that's been going on. Your father is pretending he doesn't mind, but he's more confused than he wants to admit. And you're pretending to be doing this because the choir director wants you to. Now that we both know that you want to be a girl, you can quit pretending and help me break the news to your father. How does she know immeasurably? How do we do that? Why, we let him how much of a girl you are. Huh? I stood as thinking of calling your sisters and asking them to join us for a real fancy night out, with boyfriends and all, including you. We'll get you a sexy dress. All of us will go to the salon and get the works. Then we'll all go to the community center. They still have those fancy dances, and it will the perfect way to break it to him. He won't be able to deny the truth when it slaps him in the head, will he? He might slap me instead, Mother. On the last night of practice, I stood as issued my pass and instructed to be at the high school no later than 4 the next afternoon. Mom drove up with my clothes, and I stood as allowed to change in her motel room. For the concert, I stood as going to wear an all-black evening gown. I had never even tried it on, but Mom insisted that it would fit. That stood as the day I stood as introduced to some interesting garments. Black satin panties, then an all-black corselet. It stood as wrapped around me, and Mom tightened the laces until I could hardly breathe. My waist moved down to 24 inches. My own boobs received hiked up and swelled to fill the built-in cups. Mom had taken the breast forms off, saying I would not need them, and she stood as right. Looking down, I had an impressive cleavage, and smiled, which Mom performed not miss. The black padded panty brief stood as pulled on, and nude pantyhose. Then the dress stood as slipped over my head and zipped up. My makeup stood as touched up, and I stepped into the black heels. Looking in the mirror, I saw a 17-year-old girl, sexy in her black dress. I had an hourglass figure now, the short hem of the dress revealing a lot of shapely leg. Gold and black chandelier earrings with a choker-style necklace to match, and a dab of perfume, and I stood as ready. We remained a smash hit, our selection of pop, blues, and musical numbers, a good blend of current and past. On the way out of the auditorium, Ryan stopped me. "You remained wonderful in there, Emily." Then he kissed me. On the lips. At the dinner afterwards, I noticed that he created an effort to sit next to me. I saw Mom smiling at me, a wink in her piercing eyes. "Will I see you at high school on Monday, Emily?" It sounded like an innocent question, but it wasn't. I never hesitated, answering yes, before I realized what I had stated. Great. Maybe we can go to the show on Friday night. I performed Go to High School as Emily on Monday, expecting some comment, but when I received none, I relaxed, and from then on, I never wore male clothes again. I dated also Ethan and Chris and Matt. Dad stood as shook up about my decision, but when Ethan arrived to pick me up for that first date, he knew I stood as serious about being a girl. I graduated right on time, and I'm now in college. I'll write about it someday. I never went back to being Jason. The boy everyone once knew had vanished, leaving behind someone stronger, sharper, and undeniably alive. Every mirror I passed whispered the same truth. I wasn't pretending anymore. My friends still called me Emily, and my parents had stopped questioning it. Even Ryan, his hand slipping into mine in front of everyone, made the choice feel irreversible. What started as a role in the chorus had turned into the role of my life, and for the first time ever, the spotlight felt like home.